Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. I'm conscious of time, so I will try and run through what I feel is important, and based on my previous experience, what people would ask, to leave more room for the Q&A session as well, because I found that in the past, it's the Q&A piece that would sort of benefit and get that interaction going as well. So just quickly, does this button work? Boom, no? Does this work? No? Or do I? Does it work? Okay, just briefly, so ICFAL, we do a lot of educational outreach projects where we teach community, we engage in the community. So please feel free to criticize. You don't need to agree with me. Okay, I'm just sharing my experience. I don't make fatwa. I've been in the field for a long time. I've consulted with scholars in the field, so I'm just transmitting information rather than providing you with fatwa. That's the key thing, right? And also be very critical minded as well. Don't feel like you need to take everything that I say, but rather as we go through some of this material, feel free to go, okay, that doesn't sound right, or if you have some questions, write it down. Or maybe depending on how we go, we can even become more interactive. You can just put up your hand and we can go back and forth, inshallah. Oh, here? Closer to the mic? Okay. Okay, they don't want me moving around.
Can you also speak a little bit louder?
I'm in trouble now.
No, just a little bit louder as well.
Louder, okay. Okay. I've got to speak louder and I've got to stay still. Here. All right, bismillah. Does it? Hey man, is it working? No. Is it working? Good now? Yep. Okay. So I just want to put it in context as well, because what Dr. Tanvir discussed is really important about managing money. And money will be more important for you as your life progresses, as you have more responsibility in life. And this is a very interesting chart I've sort of had throughout my studies, where you have a few stages in life where you're a youth in school, and then you're in your early work life, your work and family life, and then your retirement life. If you really think about your life in these segments, you really start seeing, okay, how do I interact? How do I deal with money? And each of these processes, each of these stages in life, you would think about money more, and you'll think about it in a different way as well. And I'm conscious of, with a lot of these seminars, is that there's a lot of information. So I'm going to try and give you some tools and some concepts that you can sort of put in your pocket and to whip out and think about your finances Islamically as you progress in your lives. And this button doesn't work all the time, man.
Hold on, sorry. Try now?
Okay. Do you need to press something all the time, or should I just?
No, try now.
Yeah? Or should I just press there instead? Okay. First of all, I want to set the context of what the Sharia means, right? Because when we speak about Islamic finance, sometimes it becomes very dry. We speak about money, and then you think about what's this relationship with my religion, with my deen. So I really want to refocus us and define what is Sharia. Because often when we think about Sharia, we hear this term all the time. We think it's a set of laws that we need to follow in our lives, and that's it. Okay, but I want to provide you with quite a holistic definition that the scholars have given. They said, مَا شَرَعَ اللَّهُ لِعِبَادِهِ, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated for His slaves, His servants, min aqa'id, from your beliefs, wal ibadat, from your acts of worship, wal akhlaq, from your manners, wal mu'amalat, from your daily dealings, from your transactions with people, wa nudhum al-hayati fi shu'biha mukhtalifa, and every single aspect of your lives, لتحقيق السعادة, to attain happiness, as-sa'ada, fi dunya wa akhirah, in this life and the next. That is the Sharia. So when we speak about Islamic finance, when we speak about the importance of not taking riba, the importance of halal investing, it's because it is a part of this holistic set of laws that would provide you with happiness, attainment of satisfaction and prosperity in this life and the next. That is the Sharia. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you all these set of rules, so you can navigate and move around in between so you may obtain happiness in this life and the next. And the point of all this Islamic finances discussion is so that you can have this happiness and prosperity in this life and the next, within the bounds of the Sharia. So can I, oh, is it still this button? Oh, perfect, alhamdulillah. Okay, so I want to set it into context, right? So Islamic finance, it's not a field within and of itself. Often when we think about Islamic finance, I can't move, can I? Okay. We think about this star, only this section here, right? But to understand Islamic finance well, and the reason why I say this is these are what all the scholars are thinking when they're making all these fatwa and laws and regulations about how you should invest your money. They're thinking about the Arabic language, the fiqh, the Quran, the hadith, all these different chapters of Islamic sciences all lead to how then, is this the, oh perfect, how then we make decisions in Islamic finance. You need to understand all these things to understand how the scholars make rulings on Islamic finance. So it's not a field that you take within and of itself. It is actually built on various pillars of Islamic knowledge. All right, I'm going to move. Let me know the time as well, yeah? When you can, yeah. Okay. So Islamic finance and money has actually, it touches many aspects of the deen. When you actually think about it, Ramadan, we're thinking about Zakat al-Fitr. Zakat, you always think about money. Punishments and compensation, money. Politics in Islam also has a chapter on money. How we manage the orphans, money. Inheritance is about money. Business is about money. So the Sharia actually touches many aspects of your Islamic life, right? And it is only through this business, we have all these different chapters of Islamic finance, which then lead to your contemporary finance issues. So sometimes when you ask a question, you say, brother Yusuf, is investing in shares halal or haram? And I'll say, but bro, sis, it's not it can be a yes or no, or it can be, we're going through every single, can I reverse or I can't? Which one? Oh, the other one? Oh, perfect. So you can have the short answer, which is, it could be a yes or no, or you can have this deep explanation of why it is a yes and why it is a no. And today we'll touch upon some of these just to give you a bit of perspective about how this whole field works. Because sometimes when we speak about Islamic finance, it is very dry. So I'm going to try and make it sort of a bit more, sort of expand our minds a bit and give us a bit more sort of tools and principles we can think about Islamic finance. Now, when you actually read throughout the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about spending money, it's often in very general terms. Anfiqu fi sabilillah, spend in the path of Allah, all right? But when we're speaking about dividing wealth, and we spoke about zakat, didn't we? Yeah, we spoke about zakat, and the reason I just want to close off this zakat chapter, when we speak about dividing wealth in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes very specific. Inheritance, it's very specific. It's razor sharp. The spoils of war, it's very sharp, very specific. And likewise, zakat is very specific. And I just want to touch on this point just to show you a bit of the beauty of Islam, that zakat is one of the pillars of Islam. We pay it every year. We don't think much about it, all right? But when you actually step back, the scholars of Islam actually show us that zakat has an economic benefit to society. When they speak about zakat, they're speaking about how zakat moves stagnant wealth. So you have a certain amount of money in your bank account, $100,000, it's not moving. Zakat forces you to move that money around. And the scholars say that by giving your wealth away in zakat, if you're a very wealthy person, the poorer person is able to have more marginal benefits from using that zakat. So $1 to a millionaire isn't going to mean much. But $1 to a very poor person, they can actually maximize its utility, zakat. And if you look at the categories of zakat, you might read it in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَمَسَاكِينَ and so forth. You read these categories, but subhanAllah, you may not think about, okay, why are these categories important? But if you actually start dividing these categories of zakat into different governmental departments and how you manage a nation, then you start to understand, okay, there's a department for the poor people. There's a department of business, those ones who look after the taxation zakat. There's a department of those in the cause of Allah, the military. There's a department of the needy and the travelers, right? Those who do business. So subhanAllah, when you start actually thinking about zakat and all these things about Islam, Islamic laws and regulations, in relation to your Islamic finance, your money, you'll start seeing these wisdoms coming through. And I know that in the community, a lot of times we are told to stay away from money. Money is evil, it's not that important. But I want to challenge that narrative a bit. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that Sulaiman alayhi salam قَالَ رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَحَبْ لِي مُلْكًا لَا يَنْبَغِي لِأَحَدٍ مِّن بَعْدِي. He says, "Oh Allah, give me a kingdom so large that no one else has such a large kingdom after me." Sulaiman alayhi salam, a prophet asking for wealth. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. Oh Allah, give us hasana in this life and the next. We're asking for wealth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not prevent us from asking for wealth. Now, we might say, okay, well, what about other ayat in the Quran which says that this wealth is a test? إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالَكُمْ وَأَوْلَادَكُمْ فِتْنَةً. Verily, your wealth and your children are a fitna. It's a test. But a test, my dear respected brothers and sisters, does not actually mean it's a good or a bad thing. It's how you progress and how you, what's your result in the test, in these trials, that's important. So wealth itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it's a test, but in a test you can be either extremely successful or you can be extremely miserable in your test. You can fail miserably. So when we speak about Islamic investing and we're speaking about sort of accumulating money in Islam, yes, it's a test, but it's a test that you can use to succeed magnificently. Magnificent, subhanAllah. Okay? And finally, I'll just round this concept up, and I hope this is a concept that you can use in your sort of your Islamic toolbox. We also have a hadith, الدنيا ملعونة وما فيها إلا ذكر الله وما ولاه وعالما ومتعلم. We hear this all the time, that the dunya is cursed and what is in it except for the alim and one who is learning. So sometimes we might take this hadith and we think, okay, the only way to be not cursed is to be a student of knowledge or to be a teacher. But when you actually read this hadith carefully, it says the dunya is cursed except what? The remembrance of Allah. So I always say to people all the time, when you're able to change your intention with money in regards to how you use it, how you obtain it, where you use it into a way that helps you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can be very wealthy and also have wealth as a way for you to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because with your wealth, alhamdulillah, mashallah, you're probably already thinking about, I want to help Palestine, I want to help the poor around the world. That's one thing you can do with your wealth. Or you can use your wealth to accumulate material things, and hence that's how you would fail the test of wealth quite miserably. So house financing, let's go. Unfortunately, when it comes to house financing, a lot of the community gets their money from the banks. That's it. As an industry participant, I know a lot of Muslims get their money from banks. So that's one way people obtain financing for a house in particular. Number two, another way is through investment funds. So we spoke about before, there are some investment funds out there that invest in real estate. You put your money in there and that channels through to purchasing a house for your everyday average Muslim. Another way is the co-op way, which is the ICFAL way, where you buy shares into an organization and these shares and the money obtained from that is used to finance housing. And another way that money can come from financing houses in the community is through mortgage managers. And what they do is they'll take from a bank and they'll provide it to you through a bank. So they'll take the money, they'll be an intermediary, they'll convert this money from the bank into a Sharia compliant contract, and then they will provide you with housing that way. And please, if you have questions, write it down. We'll go through that more. Oh, should I do some questions now? Straight away? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah? All right, yeah. Let's go. We'll feel free to float, yeah. This one there, mortgage man. Yeah, mortgage managers, yeah, there's quite a few. Sorry? Yeah. So there are a few organizations like Amana, MCCA has a model that does the mortgage. So they have two versions, one from their own funds, one from banks. So there are organizations that do that, right? And this is a very important point, which I'll move to, because the most important thing is, if you're going to ask whether these are Sharia compliant, my reply is always, well, every organization that provides these products, they have their own Sharia scholars and their own Sharia certificates. Technically, their Sharia board is approving these products. Yeah? So that's the clarification I always make, in that, well, I'm not saying something is halal, haram, but rather they have their own scholars that approve, or, you know, even banks. We have fatwa that we've heard of saying the first house on riba is permissible, right? We've heard that before, and everyone's going to start questioning, but write that down. Let's talk about it if we have time. Source of funding, sometimes you might hear that it's not important, but the classical scholars actually say it is important. And it's important not just from a classical Islamic perspective, but also from a modern day contemporary perspective. From the contemporary perspective, if money is coming from its own organization, then the organization has more freedom to dictate the clauses and terms of the contract to make it more Sharia compliant. Number two, if the classical scholars have said that, as a general rule, the more someone is dealing in haram, the more you should avoid dealing with them. Right? So it does matter where funds come from. And there are two main products in Australia in regards to house financing. One is a rent-to-own type model, and one is a diminishing partnership type model. Rent-to-own is basically you agree to rent for a certain period, let's say 30 years, and at the end of that period, if you fulfill the obligation to rent over 30 years, you'll be given the house, you'll be sold the house at a very minimal amount, $1, or you'll be gifted the house if you rent for 30 years. The other model is you buy the house together, and over time, the organization sells you sort of shares of the house, a little bit by a little bit of the house, until you own the house at the end of 30 years. But at the same time, you also pay rent on the portion of the house that the organization owns. What does that mean? Subhanallah, what's this guy talking about? You might be saying. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that first, the diminishing partnership model, because I feel that this slide explains it a lot better. We've explained it a million times. So essentially, the organization and the member purchase the property in partnership. Number two, the member pays rent on the financial organization's portion of the building. The member gradually purchases more and more of the house. Throughout the term, the person can buy more or less shares depending on their financial situation. And then finally, at the end of it, they own the house. Okay, that's the diminishing partnership model. Rent-to-own model is this, where the bank buys. It's very interesting how fundamentally how it's meant to work in the Sharia is that someone or the bank will buy the house, they'll rent it to you. If you rent the house for 30 years, they'll gift you the house. Like a rent, like you're renting now, okay? If you rent over a certain number of years, if you fulfill that obligation, they will give you the house. And in some Islamic countries where they actually implement this as it is, you could be renting a house for 15 years and you start defaulting, and at the end of 15 years, you have nothing. Why? Because you're renting the house. You broke your promise to rent the house. You promised to rent the house over 30 years, but you only rented for 15, so you defaulted, hence you're just evicted like any other tenant. But in Australia, it works a bit differently, where they can't do that. They can't do that. They have to provide you a bit of equity on the house. I'm going to zoom through. So that's house finance in Australia. And just a little bit about where this money goes from an ICFAL perspective. The money goes to purchase houses, and then the money kind of goes back to benefiting community. Yeah. Are you able to share this slide with us? Yeah, I'll share it. Yeah. I'll share all these slides, inshallah. A very important point the brother asked before. Okay. There are so many differences of opinion in the field of Islamic finance. I was speaking to a brother the other day. I was telling him, look, it's like the Wild West. You know, you're out there, everyone has their guns blazing. There's not many rules and regulations sometimes. And the products and the industry is accelerating so quickly, the scholarship is not able to provide rulings and judgments on every single thing, right? Buy now, pay later, some of the literature is starting to come up within the last 1 or 2 years, but that's already a product that's been happening for the past 3 or 4 years, right? Crypto, it's not that difficult of a subject when you speak about crypto. The scholars have finally spoke about it a year or two ago, and they said, look, crypto is haram from how it's implemented, but it's not haram in and of itself. You get the difference? It's not haram bidat, it's not haram by itself, but it's haram in how it is implemented. And, you know, as Muslims, we always like to give violent examples. So I'll give one, like the sword. Is the sword haram in and of itself? No, it's not. It's a sword, right? But how you use that can make it haram. Crypto. Think about it that way. It's not haram in and of itself, but how it is implemented and operationalized, and as we know it today, some scholars have said, look, it's not permissible. But anyway, other scholars have said, yes, it is permissible. So then it's that Wild West, that difference of opinion I'm speaking about. So, as a normal Muslim, can you follow a fatwa that a sheikh or an organization has given? Yes, you can. If you trust the scholar, you trust the body of a scholarship, you trust the organization, you can follow fatwa. You can follow fatwa. And I say this all the time because as an individual, and you know, subhanAllah, we've been studying years and years and years of this. Yeah, I've worked in the industry. I've studied years and years of this. I've spoken to scholars. I keep on speaking about the industry, learning about the industry, but there are still so many things as a normal person I don't understand, right? So it's very difficult to understand. If you're going to study 1 or 2 years, you won't understand everything. Of course, it's absolutely permissible for you to follow an opinion of a sheikh, right? And Imam al-Nawawi, he provides a very interesting insight into this. He said, look, if there's differing views of a fatwa, there are a few paths that you can take. One, take the heavier of the two. Take the more difficult opinion. Number 2, take the easier opinion. Number 3, you personally strive hard and see which scholar has more knowledge, has more piety within the field, and take that opinion. Number 4, you ask another mufti who then agrees with you, and then you take that opinion. Subhanallah. Or number 5, he just chooses. There's all these different paths that you can take, right? And going back to this, did you show this before? Yeah, you showed? Okay, nice. All right. Oh. So going back to this, right? Always seek, not only Islamic finance is that challenging, my dear brothers and sisters. It's not only you need to seek professional financial advice, like Dr. Tanvir, but you also need professional qualified mashayikh advice. You need to actually do those 2 things because you won't know which fatwa to follow, which one is better, right? So it is perfectly fine for you to approach your local sheikh, explain your situation, and take his opinion. An example, a story. I once got and this is very common, but this is just one of many stories, right? And I'm telling you this story to show that things are not always black and white, right? A brother, he has his Islamic finance set up, not with ICFAL, but you know, another Islamic finance organization. He puts $100,000 deposit to construct a house based on this Islamic finance approval, right? When interest rates increased, this Islamic financial institution says, oh no, we can no longer provide you with that finance. So he has no option now. What does he do? Does he forfeit his $100,000, his life-saving deposit, or does he go to the bank? What does he do? And you know what? I'm not going to answer that for you. What are you going to do? What are you going to answer to someone like that? Are they going to take the first house on riba fatwa? Are they going to go somewhere else? What are they going to do? Do they forfeit? Do they, mashallah, take the strong opinion and forfeit their $100,000? So that's the grey that we're always dealing with Islamic finance. There's no clear-cut, absolute, this is the right answer. And if someone tells you, like you said, if someone tells you, brother or sister, this is going to guarantee you profit and it's guaranteed halal, oh, be double, triple careful. Yeah. Shares, very quickly. Shares can be basically divided into 3 types, and this is how you can think about it. Halal, mixed, or haram. And you can... 6? Okay. Can I just finish this slide? Yeah? Okay. Halal shares are companies that only deal in halal, or the operations are halal. It's easy. If Tanvir, mashallah, started up a business, you know that, mashallah, it's going to be 100% halal. He's not going to deal with the bank. He hates the banks. You know that this operation is going to be halal to invest in. And then you have haram businesses where, you know, someone starts up a business, they're going to sell drugs. I'm going to start up a company. I'm going to sell drugs, bro. I'm going to steal cars. You know that's haram. That's haram. It's easy, clear cut. And then you have these stuff that are mixed companies where generally the objectives of the organization is halal. For example, there's many. All right, for example, like Woolworths, right? Generally, they're a grocery store. They sell most things halal. But when you go into Woolies, you also see some haram products. They sell pork, they sell some alcohol. So these are those mixed type companies that the scholars then set criteria and filters and have differences of opinions upon. And then we'll go to the Q&A, yeah? Oh, can I share one more thing, man? Because I think the people will really like this. I'm going to skip. I have all this, I'll share that. But I want to share with one last hadith. And this is a hadith, it's a Sahih Bukhari Muslim hadith. It's about Zubair ibn Awam, one of the 10 Sahaba guaranteed Jannah in this life. He speaks about him, his son speaks about him, that when he was martyred, he was left with no money, but he had certain lands in Al-Ghaba, 11 houses in Medina, 2 in Basra, 1 in Kufa, 1 in Egypt. But he had $2.2 million in debt. And you think, subhanAllah, why would a companion have $2.2 million in debt? It's because he was so trustworthy at that time that people would go to him and say, Ya Sahabi, can you keep this as a trust for me? Can you keep this microphone for me? When I'm traveling to China, I want you to keep this microphone because when I come back, I want to make sure it's he. He would say, no, I can't do that. I can't keep your money as a trust because I can't use it. I need to keep it in its form. There are certain rules and regulations. I need to protect your money. So he said, give me your money in debt instead. Instead of giving me 1 dinar, give it, to keep for safekeeping, give me that 1 dinar as a debt. So he would take this money and he would actually purchase property. He would buy assets with this property. So when he died, he ended up with $2.2 million in debt. And during that time, his time, the Islamic empire grew and grew and grew, and a lot of wealth entered the ummah. So you had the Islamic lands that are starting to become very wealthy, and the property prices, as we know, becomes very high. So what happened when he finally died, radiyallahu anhu, when he finally sold all this and they calculated his entire assets as a result of what he did, it is said that he had 50 million dinar. Right? And if you translate that, what that actually means in dinar, 1 dinar was actually 4.25 grams of gold, and he had that much kilograms in gold, in value. Subhanallah. So this Sahabi, he died a multi-billionaire, billionaire in today's terms. But he wasn't crazy, radiallahu anhu, about money. He did not obsess about money, but he just made very simple decisions about his wealth that benefited himself and his family in the long term, right? And that's the importance. This is practically why not being obsessed about wealth, but taking little steps to manage your money is important. And then we'll go into the Q&A. Yeah. We'll leave it from there.
12 minutes of Q&A.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so I had this, that's what I want to talk about. So there's basic criteria that AOFI sets up. So AOFI is like it's a Sharia standards council to say, look, how you can invest in. Basically, the simple objectives are no haram objectives. So the business needs to be engaged in halal activities. For example, no pork, no alcohol, etc. Okay. Interest-bearing loans need to be less than 30% of the value of the company. They call it market capitalization. So do we all have a finance background? Can I just get a raise of hands, or only mashallah? That's why you're asking all the questions, bro. Okay. No. So market value of an organization is generally defined as the price of the share multiplied by the amount of shares this company has in the market. So if a company has 1 million shares and they're worth $1 each, this company is worth $1 million. So this company, you can't have, so for $1 million value company, you cannot have more than $300,000 in interest-bearing loans as a general rule. But this is just general guidelines, because you might say to me now that, hold on, are you telling me that 30% haram is okay? Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's what the standards say. Because there are other scholars that then say, no, this 30% doesn't make sense. And then they go on to criticize the hadith. Not criticize the hadith, they go on to criticize how the hadith is interpreted to arrive at this rule. Yeah. But generally, these are the filters that are used, that if you want to invest in Islamic ETF, we spoke about the Hijaz stuff, any sort of Islamic investing organization, managed funds that invest in shares, generally these are the rules they follow. If not this specifically, something towards that extent. Yeah, brother.
But the market cap keeps changing.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But they only provide you an annual report.
Yes.
Or a half year or a quarterly update.
Yes.
Which doesn't tell you if you're over the 30% in February or March, whether you're back down to 5. So how do you...
Yeah, so the market is volatile, right? We spoke about it. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down. The scholars have said, depending on which organization you follow, some of them say, look, you have a 90-day grace period, right? But if you actually become even more critical and you say, well, I always say that, look, this 30% is like your absolute, if you think about the borders in which you operate, right? And you know that if I step past this line, I'm going to be in haram. But if I'm past this line, I'm going to be halal. Why do you want to be walking here all the time? You know what I mean? You want to be walking at 30% all the time. But so when you actually invest, if you actually want to go through and analyze the stocks yourself, like for example, Telstra, which is what I wanted to do, you don't want to be going at 30% all the time, right? You want to sort of go 10%, so you can you have a more margin of safety for Sharia compliance when the share price goes up and down. So ideally, you don't want to invest in organizations that have 29% in debt. But technically, if you're going to put a line in the sand, you can still invest based on these standards, based on this filter. Yeah? And I'm not saying that I'm agreeing with filter, I'm not saying that this is halal, I'm just saying this is the filter. Yeah?
I just want to add something to that. So one of the things, and we're not covering it in this workshop, we'll do one in the future. One of the things we need as an ummah to do is we need more entrepreneurs. We need people to start more businesses that are halal and obviously avoiding all
so we can invest in
so that you can invest in them, right? We need more businesses that are listed on stock markets, but also private placements. We talk about the sukuk issue. We want more Muslim businesses running cafes, trade businesses that are going to grow and they're going to take finance. So one of the key messages is when all of you people, inshallah, by the end of today are going to start your budgets and start your investment plans, you're going to put together pools of money, and that pool of money is then going to go support this brother and that sister to start a business and to grow. This is how we're going to create that circularity in our economy. So one of the things I want you to take away is these rules, scholars have identified. We obviously stick to them, we respect them, but we also want to start charting our own course of the future. And today is the first step in your journey. But imagine if every single Muslim in Australia started to think like you guys are, then we're going to have a whole new sort of assets to invest in. Just wanted to add.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. No, exciting. Come on, man. Come on.
How many more time? We've got another 7 minutes for questions. Yes?
What's the general Islamic philosophy on money and wealth? So obviously there's like cases around there's obviously certain, like, are there certain industries that are better to invest in? Because sometimes it feels like where it's like a filter, it's Islamic, and then you just invest. Like, are there ways to think about it? It's like there's more virtuous ways to spend and earn.
Yeah, definitely. Look, this thing, right? Like, when we speak about mu'amalat or investing, the most beautiful thing about that is it's halal until proven it's haram. It's not like acts of worship where you have to prove it's halal to do. You have to prove that, look, you know, the evidence has to support we pay 4 raka'at for asr, for example. You need a clear hadith. But when it comes to business transactions, everything's halal until it's proven haram. So it really depends. I mean, yes, there are certain segments that in our context might be more helpful than others, but the Sharia itself does not restrict to anything in particular. It gives you general principles, right? And it's very interesting. I mean, just the other day, I wish Tanvir went to that as well. So there was a Islamic Finance conference at Australian National University in Canberra, right? And we had this discussion about how Islamic finance should be fostered and how we need to always make money for the investors, right? But my challenge, my response to that is, well, Islamically, we're about communal wealth growing. Ta'awanu ala birr wa taqwa. We should cooperate in good and taqwa and piety, right? So Islamic perspective from an Islamic perspective, it's a very different sort of concept of wealth building where it's more communal rather than the capitalistic of, you know, returning and always caring about the investor. But in regards to particular industries, I think Tanvir might have some sort of color on that, but personally, I feel like whatever your profession is, whatever your interest is, we need Muslims in all those spaces as long as it's halal. As long as it's halal, whether you like engineering, you like whatever, you know, I'm there to support anyone as long as it's halal. And I think that's the best way to think about it, unless Dr. has anything to add. Yeah.
The only thing I was just say is that, again, to the point is, if we can create more businesses that are doing more positive impact in society, like if we can support organizations that are solving problems, reducing climate footprint, creating jobs, reducing poverty, that's obviously trying to add extra values. And again, that's called impact investing. You can look it up.
Yeah.
So there are different types of investments, obviously. So there are opportunities to do that. And there are a lot of organizations that are supporting that creation. I mean, there's a lot of Muslim businesses in the NDIS space, for example. And some of them are now raising capital and you can invest into them. Recently, there was a stock listing of a Muslim-run NDIS company. So just a couple of examples to think about. Yes?
So, take up the different sort of investment like ETFs and bonds, etc. Like, I've heard about them before, but as someone who's quite young, still like, there hasn't been a clear way to invest in it. Like, you know, like, it's hard to find, you know, where can you buy the bond holdings, or like, where can you invest properly in like an ETF? Like, could you, like, just provide some recommendations about first places that we could, like, search up, like the website or place that we go to for these sort of, like, different, like, ways to invest?
Yeah, look, so I think, have you spoken about Wholesum as well? Yeah.
No, I mean, you answer and I'll give the...
Yeah, okay. Yes, there are. So, I mean, if we speak about these ETFs, right, you have one set up in the US, there's quite a few in the US, in Australia, and it's about just starting up. It's a very simple process, and this is not financial advice, obviously, it's general advice where you can get this information. It's starting up a brokerage account, right, with an Australian provider, and you can just look for share brokerage, look for the cheapest, and then when you're set, you basically put money into your account and you can start buying these ETFs, right? You look for Islamic ETF, whatever the name is, right? You can Google Islamic ETF and it'll tell you the list. In Australia, it'll tell you some US, and then you can just plug your money there, and then you can just go ahead and start investing that way. If that's... Yeah, it's all online. Yes, it's all, even apps, man. Like even apps, like you just, it's really quick to do these days.
We'll send out some resources for people to look into. There are a lot of Islamic apps out there that filter. So the question on stock filtering, there's a company called Zoya. There's Islamically, you can download them. They do the filters according to AOP. So that's when if you want to pick out individual stocks to invest.
Yeah.
Of course, there are Islamic ETFs like Hijaz we mentioned. Wahed will list out a couple of them. And there are also fund managers that invest into Islamic stocks as well. So we'll send those resources out, speak to your financial advisors to work out how suitable they are, but as general information, we'll send it out. I think we've got time for one more question, and then we're going to have a 5-minute break before the next session starts. Last question, yep.
So for that, you know that the house finance, like they have, like with the banks, co-op, and
Yeah.
so for co-op, like, do they only get funding through investments in?
Yes. So that's how ICFAL works, right? So basically, people purchase shares to become part of the cooperative, and that comes entirely from the members, the mums and dads, or the Ahmeds and the Yusufs that goes in, and then this pool of money then goes to finance houses under the partnership agreement.
Wouldn't that mean there's like a massive wait list or something?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, exactly. And that goes back to the point of how, as a community, we need to build these infrastructure up. We need more funds. We need to get together and support these things. We need to get together and.
Muslims putting their money in Combank was to put into ICFAL, we'll be able to finance a lot more home loans.
Oh man,
right?
you can,
So
mashallah, yeah.
transfer your money to ICFAL.
No,
no, that's not
Financial-
advice. That's not financial advice. Okay, sorry, we've got to wrap it up there. There's a lot more questions. This is just the start. We want to organize a whole series of more events for everyone, inshallah, and going to different topics. Can you
take some
please, as
photos?
you're walking out, share feedback?
Please take
Scan the QR code.
Did you get
We
some
need to
photos?
hear from you. Share your feedback, and inshallah, the next session can start in 5 minutes.
So-
You can go for about an hour
Yeah.
for that section.